I greatly appreciate the effort that we're all putting into responding to this mass tragedy and ensuring nothing like this ever happens again. Steve, I'll turn it back to you and I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your work to this point and the work that we know you're going to be doing in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you. Next, we're going to pass it off to Mayor Sam Weaver. I believe there's going to be a city council meeting this evening that he will need to get over to shortly. And so, Mayor, we'll hand it off to you.
Thank you very much, Steve. And I want to thank Edie and Steve and Judy for inviting me and for hosting this gathering. It's super important right now that people get together with loved ones, with their friends and their acquaintances. And this, unfortunately, is one way that we do that in the times that we're in at the moment. So thank you for having me. I will try and be brief because there are many people here who have a lot to say. This event is obviously deeply impacting everyone in the community, including me, including council members. And we do want to start for a while with focus on the victims and their families and supporting them. You know, they have suffered the most devastating impacts of this event, and it will take them the longest to be able to get back to something that looks like a normal life. So please keep them in your thoughts, donate, attend vigils, and do anything that you can to make sure that the victims' families know that they're supported and appreciated. I want to take a moment to recognize the first responders who showed up to this tragedy, this monstrous event. They put their lives on the line, and as we know, one police officer paid the ultimate price for their willingness to run towards danger. I want to thank, in addition to the police, firefighters, and medics who were there, all of the staff at King Soopers who worked so hard to get their customers out. I want to thank all the electeds here for reaching out and offering support. It has been super helpful. All of our neighboring communities, not only did they contribute personnel to our immediate response, they have backfilled for our police when they have needed time to grieve and cope. And our surrounding communities have all been wonderful. They've reached out. And so our region feels this as if it happened in their community. It's not quite as pointed as it is to us, but we have received great support in this community. And going one step above, I did get a call today from President Biden. President Biden sends his love and sympathy to everyone here. It is a relief to have a leader at the very top of our government who cares so much about what happens to the people that he governs and he serves. And so it was wonderful to get a call from him. And it focused at first on recovery and healing. There will be time to talk about our response to prevention of this, and I'm going to leave that to the other folks here on the call. But remember that in the place we are now, we have a leader of the executive branch of the federal government who supports the goals that we all have and share with our delegation. So that is great. I want to emphasize also the rest of our staff and how much work they've been doing. The city staff, that will not be work that is seen as much by the community, but things like organizing the contacts for mental health support, making sure that there is an easy way to get to the city website and then find all the resources that folks need to get to. So I want to take a special moment and recognize the incredibly hard work that these folks are doing. Not only have they had to deal with COVID and everything else that's come along, this has been on top of all that. So our staff has been stellar, and I thank them. The days to come, we want to, from a city standpoint, focus on rebuilding our sense of safety. How do we return to a calm order for our days and enjoy our life in Boulder. And to do that is going to be a process, and it won't happen overnight. And, one of the milestones that is in my head is when we reopen that King Soopers. That is a gathering place for the members of our community. It's where they get their food. It's where they see their neighbors, and it's where they go to get support like COVID vaccinations. So it's a critical piece of that part of our town and our entire community. And I look forward to the day that we open that back up to the community. With that, I'm going to say thank you to everyone for your support. I will stay on the call for a little while. I'm going to try and make myself available. If I can be helpful at the state capitol, I will go and testify there on any measures that are taken in the future. Similarly, with federal measures, I stand ready with the rest of our council and our whole community to support any progress we can make on making sure this does not happen in another community again. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. We're now going to move into our federal delegation so they can give some perspective on this situation and what they are seeing federally. We'll first hand it off to Congressman Joe Neguse.
Thank you, Majority Leader Fenberg, and to Representative Hooton and Representative Mabele. Thank you all for hosting this incredibly important conversation tonight. And thanks to Mayor Weaver as well for his leadership. I know District Attorney Doherty is no longer on the call, but I want to also just credit him and his incredible team for all of their work as they work to pursue justice. As he said, the federal, state, and local response has been tremendous, and law enforcement here in Boulder County, and that includes the District Attorney's Office and the Boulder Police Department, have been tremendous in responding to this terrible tragedy. And of course, we're grateful that Senator Hickenlooper and Senator Bennett, my colleagues in the delegation, have joined us today. There are a few words to express how our community is feeling right now. I know that all of us, our hearts are broken, that the loss of life is truly heartbreaking, and it's unimaginable. As Senator Fenberg so eloquently put it, as we think about every victim that we lost, every life being incredibly precious, and the 10 people who lost their lives, the many friends and family members and loved ones, neighbors and community members that are now mourning their loss. I know many of you, many in our community, are in shock and are in anguish and grieving, and we certainly want you to know that we're with you. And while there's nothing that can be said tonight that can remove the pain or heal those wounds, we are with you. And I know that Boulder will come together at this critical moment to support each other over the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. We've been in close contact with Mayor Weaver and with the governor, and we'll continue to be able to provide resources to our community in the coming days and weeks. I also just say, I know we've been through a lot this year as Coloradans, as Americans, and the weight of multiple challenges, multiple crises, tremendous pressure, it adds up. And so for those listening tonight, I would just encourage you to take advantage to the extent that that you need of mental health resources that are available in Boulder County. Should you need it, again, we'll put a link in the chat. I know there have been many questions already posed in regards to the resources that are available, but it's important for you all to know that you're not in this alone. For our King Soopers employees who lost colleagues, for the many witnesses who've experienced unimaginable trauma living through this week, the Boulder Police Department mourning, as we all are, the loss of Officer Talley, the loved ones and families of all of those lost, know that your community stands with you, and that at this time of great tragedy and great reckoning, that we're here for whatever you need. This moment, I think as Senator Fenberg said, it really does require a lot of us also. Moving forward from tragedy takes resilience and courage and hope. And I also want to say, and I need to say, that it doesn't have to be this way, that all of us should feel safe in our grocery stores and in our schools, in our movie theaters, and in our communities. And I just, we hear often that these situations are complex and that no one law would solve terrible tragedies like this one, but that cannot be an excuse for inaction. If there's even one step that we could take to save another human being, another child, another parent, another community member from this type of terrible tragedy, then we have to try. And we can't allow this type of senseless violence to continue to rip through our state and our nation with no response. Crisis demands a response, and Colorado has rightfully been a leader on gun violence prevention. We've made many changes at the state level, thanks to the leadership of so many who are on tonight's call, including then Governor Hickenlooper, who's now in the United States Senate, and thanks to the advocacy and the bravery of individual survivors like folks who have lost loved ones like Tom Mauser and Tom Sullivan, who have turned their anguish into action and have really raised their voices in a moment of pain. And we need the nation, we need the Congress to follow. We need the federal government to act. I know in Boulder, many of our community members are rightfully angry, they're upset, they are tired, they want to see change, and I want to see change too. And I intend to push for it every single day that I have the privilege of representing this community. To me, change means enacting universal background checks at the federal level. It means closing the Charleston loophole. It means reinstating the assault weapons ban. And I intend to push for every single one of those solutions and others in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. I want to say again, thank you all so much for coming together and supporting our community at such a critical time. And would simply close by saying we're with you, and our office is here to be a resource and to assist each of you in any way that we can. And with that, I would turn it back to you, Senator Fenberg.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate those words. We're actually going to move over to our Attorney General, Phil Weiser, as he is going to have to step out very soon, and then we'll return back to the upper chamber and check in with Senator Hickenlooper and Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Senator Fenberg, and all of you. Part of what we're seeing tonight, what we're feeling here, is how we in Colorado are a team. The collaborative spirit of us being in this work together defines who we are. And all of us are feeling our hearts breaking for the losses that are not going to heal. The trauma that is experienced this week in Boulder is being re-experienced in Aurora. The story of the people who survived the Columbine massacre is a painful one of the aftermath, also of those who survived, because all of us are touched, affected, pained by gun violence. My daughter asked me today, how many mass shootings have we had in the United States this year so far? She said 100. It's actually 107. We have a problem. No other nation faces a public health challenge on the scale that we do. And to what Congressman Neguse put as a federal agenda, I would add another point. Research into the causes of gun violence and research into what best addresses the mass shootings and the deaths that we have seen again and again. In Colorado, we have been dedicated to doing this work together in a thoughtful, consistent way. If you go back to Columbine, one of the lessons was people knew that these killers were going to go in and do a mass shooting, but no one knew where to go. That's how we got Safe to Tell. After the Aurora movie shooting theater massacre, we had leadership from then Governor Hickenlooper and so many others to pass a background check law, to pass a magazine capacity ban. We've defended those in court. And most recently, a red flag law. We're defending that in court. We will keep doing this work together. And that's the point I would leave on. This is a spirit of being together. And I can tell you, your DA, Michael Dougherty, is up to this challenge. He will do a terrific job for the community to make sure it's a fair trial and to make sure it's part of healing the breach, to learn how did this happen, to come to reconcile that it did happen, and to find a way to move forward. And so we are all broken right now. And what I can tell you is all of us working together are going to work to heal, work to address this tragedy, and work to prevent future ones. Thank you all for your leadership. It's an honor to serve with you.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Phil. We will now move on to the senators. Senator Hickenlooper, we'll move to you next. I think you're muted.
Senator Bennett, I thought, were you trying to get somewhere, Senator Bennett? No, you definitely, go ahead, John.
Okay.
I can go up to you.
Great.
Thanks.
Well,
But I'm going to
Yeah.
call you Senator Hickenlooper if you keep calling me Senator Bennett.
well, thank you, Senator Fenberg, and Mayor Weaver for pulling this together, and council members and everybody who's on this call. Obviously, this is a heartbreaking, unthinkable, incomprehensible. The words lose meaning. They end up having the meaning of the substance of tissue paper. And it is about the families of the victims. Our hearts go out to them. I think what happened in Boulder is a trauma that is never really going to leave us. I mean, it's a hole that's never filled. I know that, and none of these words do justice to the pain of those families who've lost someone. Obviously, all of Boulder grieves with you all, as does Colorado, as does really the rest of the country. The words here around the Senate, I'm coming back to Colorado tomorrow, they're all the same. Deep, deep sorrow. I mean, the horror of such senseless violence, 10 people killed while waiting for flu shots, shopping for groceries, while at work, killed for no reason. Those we lost Monday, Trelona and Suzanne and Terry and Kevin and Jody and Lynn and Ricky and Nevin and Denny and Officer Talley. They were more than just statistics. They had their own lives. They had their dreams that they were pursuing, things they'd planned to do after grocery shopping and after work. Brothers and sisters, moms and dads, sons and daughters. I think it's important that we all remember their humanity. You all know, I mean, our state's seen too many of these mass shootings, Columbine and Aurora, Flat Canyon, Highlands Ranch, Colorado Springs, beyond what any state should endure. And yet no one can look at what happened here again and say that nothing is wrong and that Washington doesn't need to act. Nobody can say that. I think it's clear that our nation has a serious, serious problem, a gun violence problem. And we can't just retreat into partisan corners. We're gonna have to put politics aside and figure out how to find some common ground to keep dangerous weapons from falling into the wrong hands. I know that Colorado has tried and failed and failed and failed to act on gun safety legislation before so many times. But, you know, as the Attorney General said, Colorado did act before. We did have the courage, and I think the Senate's going to be able to do that too. And I have tremendous gratitude and respect for the work that's already happened by people like Michael Bennett, Senator Bennett. You know, universal background checks, I think we'll get there. It's going to be a heavy lift. It shouldn't be a heavy lift, but I think we'll eventually get back to an assault weapons ban and closing the Charleston loophole and the red flag laws. We know that these common sense steps will save lives. They have broad support from Coloradans and from Americans. So we just have to find a way to work together, a way to move forward. Our state and our community is struggling right now. I share all of your grief and all of your sorrow. We have to support one another to get through this. And, you know that we're always in our office ready to hear and help wherever we can, that our office is always open, and that, you know, our real desire and total effort will be to figure out ways that we can move forward Inaction just isn't an option. Anyway, thank you all.
Thank you, Senator Hickenlooper, and thank you for your words and your actions as our governor when the progress that Colorado has made was on your watch and came to your desk, and you were a champion for those efforts. So thank you. We'll move on to you, Senator Bennett.
Thanks, Leader.
To share some words.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks to Edie and Judy as well for having me and everybody else who's on the call, and my friend John Hickenlooper. I was late for this because I was down on the floor giving a speech I've given too many times with the photographs of the people that have been killed in Colorado in gun violence, telling the country about a little bit about each one of them that I was able to glean from the newspapers over the last few days and from relatives and others. And I said, while I was down there, John Ossoff from Georgia was sitting in the chair, and I reminded him that it was just last week that I walked over to him on the floor of the Senate to tell him how sorry I was that there'd been a mass shooting in Georgia. And he said to me, and there were so many people killed in Atlanta last weekend and the weekend before that as well. And now just 3 or 4 days later, or 5 days later, maybe, there I was on the floor again, recounting while he sat in the chair, another mass shooting in Colorado. At the same time that I was there, Chris Murphy and Dick Blumenthal from Connecticut were there, and they were remembering in their remarks that I had called them when they were at the firehouse in Newtown after that elementary school was shot up and 20 elementary school students were killed. And I had called them to say, here are the kind of things you want to think about as you're confronting what happened at Sandy Hook Elementary School. And the reason I was able to have that call with them was because we had just been through the tragedy of Aurora right before that. And with then Governor Hickenlooper's leadership, as Leader Fenberg said, we were able to respond to that, make a meaningful difference, be one of the first Western states to put into place real gun reform legislation. And that gives me hope that we can do that nationally. The worst moment I would say that I had in the Senate was after Newtown, when the background check bill failed after parents and brothers and sisters of the kids who had been killed there had all come to lobby the Congress. I feel very, very personally about this, because not because I've had a gun tragedy in my family, but because Columbine happened literally right before my oldest daughter was born. And Caroline Bennett is now 21 years old. I'm extremely proud of her, but I am very ashamed of us, the political leadership in Washington, D.C., that her entire generation has grown up in the shadow of gun violence with the reasonable fear that they could be killed at their school, or killed at their synagogue, or killed at their church or a movie theater. And I can see it in their eyes every time something like this happens, or in the calls that I get from them. My generation of Americans didn't have to grow up with that level of fear. None of us were afraid as the children that I worked for in the Denver Public Schools, or Caroline's generation. And I also said on the floor tonight that I was remembering a time after the gunman in Las Vegas had taken the lives of 59 Americans. And then I went to work the next day here, and I had meeting after meeting after meeting in my office with nobody mentioning what had happened in Las Vegas. And I reflected then on when it had happened, that these shootings had become something that were so run of the mill that we didn't even talk about them. And we can't let that happen. And we won't let that happen. We can never accept this as normal. And there are politicians in Washington, D.C. who do. And we have to find a way to overcome them. We have to overcome them. And it's not just the mass shootings, but the daily violence that stalks communities all across the country, like the west side of Chicago and other places. And our communities don't move on, our kids don't move on. They carry a burden. They carry a burden that no other generation has had to carry. That is deeply unfair. I didn't grow up in America where you're 25 times more likely to be murdered by gun compared to other developed countries. And as I said tonight on the floor, we are not asking the Congress to show the same level of courage as Officer Talley or the other men and women of law enforcement or the grocery store associates who helped people escape, who were on the front lines of the pandemic to begin with. A young man who wrote that he couldn't stay home because he was a grocery store worker, an essential worker, and had to be there. We're asking our politicians to show just an ounce of courage by doing everything possible to keep weapons of war out of our communities, to pass universal background checks, to limit the size of magazines, to address the epidemic crisis of mental health in these countries, in our country. Years ago, I heard somebody in the wake of an incident like this, I heard somebody say that this was just the price of freedom. And I thought, what a shame. What a shame that somebody would say that and believe that. What a complete surrender to our children and to the victims of these crimes. What an utter compromise of Americans' right to be free from violence. That's where we need to get. And I believe we will. I'm going to insist that these issues get a vote on the Senate floor. I want to do whatever I can to help Boulder heal. You know, I'm sad to say, and I'll stop here, I'm sad to say that, you know, I've seen this over and over and over again in our state, and I know how dark it feels today, and I know you're going to come out of this experience changed. There's not any other way that you will to come out of it, but you will come out of it. And all of the country stands with you tonight, Boulder. And whatever I can do to help, I hope you'll let me know. Thank you, and I'm so, so sorry.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for being with us tonight. I'm going to now introduce and pass it off to our state representatives that represent the city of Boulder, and we'll start with Representative Judy Amabile.
Hi, thanks, Steve, and thank you so much, Senator Benner, Senator Hickenlooper, Congressman Neguse. It is really meaningful for our community that you all took time out of your busy day to come and meet with us here tonight. I am reading the questions in the Q&A, and I can see how desperately everybody wants us to act. We have to act. This has got to be a moment where we don't just do what we did at Sandy Hook. You know, I was thinking today, I was driving my kid home from his first year in college, you know, for Christmas break. And we were listening to the radio and the Sandy Hook news was breaking. And we were both just sitting there crying. It was so shocking. And it just seemed like something's going to happen now, and nothing happened. And I, like you, I'm ashamed of that because we really need to do more. So other people have spoken eloquently about gun control, and I'm going to leave them. Let me just tell you that I am absolutely committed to passing common sense gun regulations. I am very interested in an assault weapons ban and other measures that will reduce the access to deadly firearms. But I want to speak particularly because I also see a lot of questions about this, about the mental health crisis that we have in this country. And Colorado is one of the worst states in terms of access to mental health care and mental health outcomes. And there we have to do both because there is a nexus between mental health and gun violence. And that mostly plays out in suicides, which Colorado is one of the leaders in the nation. on our suicide rate. And that impacts our communities every day, even though it doesn't make the splashy headlines. But we also have to talk about it in terms of people who are really ill and need help. And how do we get people help? How do we get somebody like this young man help before this happens? And how do we keep firearms away from somebody who has been convicted of violent crime, even though it was a misdemeanor? We should be taking steps to change those rules as well. We need more hospital beds in Colorado. We need civil commitment beds. Right now, there's no place to send somebody who wants and needs hospitalization to get better. And all of the beds that we have are being occupied by people who are wrapped up in the criminal justice system. And that's another area where we really have to make some changes, because sending people with mental illness to jail makes them more unwell. It doesn't help them. No one is helped by doing time in jail. And so our hospitals are full of people waiting to get competency restoration so that they can stand trial. Our jails are full of people who have mental illness, and most people who have mental illness will never commit a crime. They're not violent people, but they need help too. And we're not providing the help that they need either. So I'm committed to working on two parallel paths, gun control and mental health resources. And I hope you'll all keep the pressure up on us to do those things that tonight we are saying we're going to do. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Judy. We'll pass it off to you, Representative Hooton.
So thank you, Steve and Judy. Just for those on the call who don't know, Judy is an absolute champion for funding and advocacy for mental health services. She and I had a call, we had a meeting with the Speaker of the House today, and we'd had this conversation with Senator Fenberg, who is the Senate leader, and we got a commitment that the COVID relief funding, the stimulus package is what we're calling it, coming to Colorado, and we get $400 billion, and there are a lot of needs for those resources. But the Speaker and our Majority Leader Fenberg have committed to setting aside some real dollars for a mental health omnibus package. So I just want to, thank Judy again for being such an incredible leader in that space, because that is part and parcel of this epidemic of gun violence, that we cannot separate the two. Just moving on, it's just so incredibly hard to manage the emotions, as we all have as policymakers, how profoundly we personally are affected by the trauma of the massacre of Monday, of our commitment to address this in the right way, not in a knee-jerk way, and in absolutely the right, responsible way. We have had meetings in the past 48 hours. I can tell almost everyone on this call has not had much sleep. But we don't need to have a lot of sleep. We need to really get to some solutions. But we are absolutely have engaged Everytown for Gun Safety, the Gifford Foundation, Moms Demand Action. Those are the three national organizations that have been working in this space, unfortunately, for over a decade. And they are going to be collaborating with us at the state capitol on the most effective legislation. And we get lots of email and ideas about what we should be doing right now, but we want to be very thoughtful. We want to make sure that what we introduce, we can pass, we can enact. There are some clouds breaking, and I will have to just recognize the NRA is near bankruptcy. We had a very a strong defender of or a U.S. senator who did not support gun reform, and Senator Hickenlooper defeated him. We had yesterday at the state capitol in a committee meeting, a hearing on a bill about reporting on a lost or stolen gun. There was not one voice of opposition, not one voice, not one person testified against that bill. 4 years ago when I started, I sat on a committee where we heard, and Judy sits on that committee now, we probably heard 5 gun bills, that even just expanded more, in my opinion, egregiously, the facility to purchase a gun, a firearm, and the way it could be used and carried. And we were up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because we had so many hundreds of people coming to testify in favor. So that 4 years later, we have a bill that 4 years ago would have drawn 300 people to the Capitol to testify in favor of that bill. Things are changing. We are seeing movement. I think now is the time to act. We heard from Senator Bennett and Senator Hickenlooper, Joe Neguse, our congressman. They are mobilized. They are super engaged, and we are at the Capitol. What happened in Boulder is just so tragic, and I don't need to repeat everything that has been spoken here about how deeply we feel for our community and for the families affected and for the employees of King Soopers that were affected and their families too. I mean, I didn't recognize any names till I saw the photos of the victims, and then I recognized, oh, wow, I know a couple of these people. Boulder is a small town. I recognized a couple of people, and then I found out yesterday that a really dear friend of mine in New York has, one of his closest friends was a cousin, Susie Fountain. I mean, Boulder is a place of 1 degree of separation. It is not a place of 6 degrees separation. And we are a very tight-knit community. This has hit us quite hard. But I also believe, because of our synchronicity here, our love for each other and our community, we will be able to heal. We will. We won't forget, but we will be able to heal. But now is the time to do that. And I thank you, everyone, for being on this call, and Majority Leader for your leadership and arranging this town hall for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Edie. There are a lot of questions in the Q&A, of course, and we've received questions from so many of you and folks all over the community and the state over the last couple of days. And what I can promise is that we will continue this conversation. We will save the questions and make sure that we respond to them. There have been, there's also a lot of questions. There's a lot of us that have been on this call tonight. So there's a lot of questions for the senators and the congressmen as well. I think we could probably talk about this for the next month if Zoom would allow it. But this is the beginning of a conversation. I think we, all the hundreds of us that are on this call, need to commit to one another that we are we are in on making sure that this is just not another tragedy where there are thoughts and there are prayers. There need to be thoughts and prayers for these families and for the victims in the community. Absolutely. I was saying it on the Senate floor the other day. My feeling is you pray for things that are bigger than you, things that you have no control over, things that are about higher forces, right? We have control over this. We have to act, and the only way we can get action is if we all do it together. And I know, given the outpouring of support and outreach from everybody recently, that this community is ready to act. Your elected officials on this call are ready to act, and we all need to make sure that this moment isn't just another one of these moments. And clearly we are seeing some action at the federal level from the president. Even I think during this call, there has been some discussion and movement on possible executive orders. So there's a whole lot more to come. I want to let folks know that, so we are getting your questions and we will answer them. I will say, as I discussed at the top of the hour, a lot of the questions around state action and federal action, and there's questions about the filibuster and the structural impediments in the U.S. Senate and how to overcome that to have federal action take place. At a state level, as I said at the beginning, and for those who are just now maybe joining, Edie, Judy, and myself are committed to taking the most meaningful, most effective steps forward that we can on a state level. We are not going to pretend like we have an answer that will prevent any tragedy from happening ever again. That's not an excuse. That's not a reason to not act. And we are committed to action. And we are having those difficult conversations with our colleagues and making sure that whatever we do, it's thoughtful and it's meaningful. And most importantly, it's effective in preventing more tragedies. And again, there is not a single solution. It needs to be a comprehensive set of policies. We have some on the books now, including high capacity magazine limits, including universal background checks, including the extreme risk protection orders, the so-called red flag law. We are debating and already have been debating others like the lost and stolen bill, the gun safe storage bill to require that guns are in safe areas or have a gun lock on them. And there are more conversations to come this session. We have been discussing the preemption issue to make sure that local governments can go above and beyond what the state does on gun violence prevention. That's going to be a discussion we have. We are also discussing policies above and beyond all of those, and there are several good ideas in the chat, several of which we are looking into, talking to experts and our colleagues, and having those difficult conversations to figure out what's most effective and what we can move forward. So more to come on that. In the near term, we all need to show up for our community. There's a city council meeting that is starting at 6 p.m., may have already started, that we urge folks to join. I believe it's all virtual, and there will be a city-specific conversation at that meeting. So that's this evening, right after this Zoom. There's a vigil at the Pearl Street Courthouse this evening at 7 p.m. And then there's another vigil at Fairview High School tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. And I urge everyone, if they are comfortable, to show up in whatever way is appropriate and makes sense for them.